We begin today the Gemara on Daf Samach Tes Amud Aleph, 5 lines from the top of the Amud, where it says Boyer Rava. So the Gemara here continues in the halachas of nullifying the neder of a girl that's a Nedarim or a rasa. Oh well, actually the Gemara here discusses Bechlal when you get to the halachas when you nullify a neder. So whether it's the husband or whether it's the father, so he has an option to validate the neder. That's what's called hakama. Or he has an option to nullify the neder. That's what's called hafara. The Gemara has various different questions that apply to this to explain, to define better what the power of the father or the husband is. So the question Rav asks is, Yesh she'ela b'hakim, oi ein she'ela b'hakim. Can you request a heter after the father or the husband went and validated the neder? He said to his daughter or to his wife, I agree, the neder is good. But now he changes his mind. He wants to get a heter for this itself that he validated it in order for him to be able to then go and nullify the neder. So can he get a shayla, can he undo his hakama, this that he validated it or not? That's the first question. Now after this, then there's another question that follows. Im timtze loymar, if you'll say, we're on Daf Samach Tes, middle of the page. Im timtze loymar, if you're going to say, yesh she'ela b'hakim, that you could undo the hakama, this that you validated the neder, now the question becomes, yesh she'ela b'hafer, can you also undo this that you nullified a neder? Or ein she'ela b'hafer, or you can't request a heter, you can't undo this that you nullified the neder. So the Ran actually explains that when it comes to the hakama, validating a neder, it's understood why the Gemara has such a question. Because validating a neder is basically very similar to making a neder itself. Just like you make a neder, Torah says that you have the power to request a heter for the neder. When you validate a neder, you're basically sort of also like making a neder, you're validating it, so therefore there's a strong svara to say that you could undo that. But when it comes to nullifying a neder, why should I say that that's something that could be undone? Why would that be compared to the neder itself that you should be able to undo it? Once you nullify the neder, that's it. The neder is gone, it's nullified. Why should there be any svara to undo it? So the Ran says that the shaila regarding the afara is not a shaila misvara, but it's because later in the Gemara we'll see that there's a certain hekish that we learn out, that we compare the koyach to nullify a neder to the koyach that a father or a husband has to validate the neder. So because of that hekish, the Gemara is asking that perhaps if we'll say that regarding hakama, you could undo the hakama, maybe the same applies to hafara, that you could undo the nullifying of the neder. But the Gemara answers and says that it's actually not the same. That here, we make this distinction. So Tashma Adam Rabbi Yechanan said that the halacha is nish'alin ala hakim. You could request a heter and undo this that you validated the neder. Ve'ein nish'alin ala hafir. You cannot request a heter. You cannot undo this that you nullified the neder. Once the neder is nullified, that's it. There's no going back on that. Another shaila, the Gemara says, Boy Rab asked the shaila, if a person says, Kayim, whether the father again or the husband says, Kayim lechi, I am Kayim this neder, I validate, I accept the neder you made, Kayim lechi, he said a second time, I validate the neder, but now, as we just said, you can undo this that you validated. So v'nishal ala kama rishayna. He now went and requested a heter, he undid the first hakama. So mahu, what happens? Do I say that the second hakama now gets activated? Meaning, originally when he repeated his words, I validate, the second validation is pointless. It doesn't really do anything because he already validated it once. So the second validation is not doing anything. But do we say that because while he spoke, the second validation was worthless, so therefore it's like it doesn't exist at all? So even if he undoes his first validation, there is no second validation. Or do I say, as long as the first validation is in effect, the second validation is worthless? But as soon as he undoes the first validation, that first validation is sort of there, hanging in the air, has nothing to take effect on because you already validated it once. But the moment you remove that first validation, the second hakama, the second validation, will take effect. Tashema.
He has to annul it.
If he wants to get rid of the validation, he'll have to be shayel on the second one as well. Tashema, so the Gemara brings, and this is something that was mentioned earlier in the Masechta, when a person does a similar thing, he makes a double shvuah. Rava said, what happens in a case, and Rava is speaking about when a person swore twice on something. He made a shvuah, I will not eat this once, and he made a shvuah a second time on the same thing, I will not eat this. So Rava said, Im nishal ala rishayna, if you got a heter for the first shvua, what happens? Shniya chala alav. The first shvua, the second shvua, that is, now takes effect. So even though while he made the second shvua, it had nowhere to take effect because he already had one shvua, but once you get rid of the first one, now the second one is there. It's just hanging in the air. It can't take effect. But once you get rid of it, it now takes effect. So it's the same thing with the person that was the hakama twice. You validated the neder twice. After you get rid of the first, the second one takes effect.
Why are you saying that? Because you said it twice, it means something. You're just saying, repeating what he said, but it didn't mean
so from this Gemara, you see, the words you say have a meaning. When a person says twice something, so it has a kayach, al pi Torah, not just some empty words. Here, the Gemara has another shaila, a very interesting sort of twisted statement a person said. Boy Rabba. Rabba has the following shaila. Kayim leichi umufar leichi. He comes and says, for example, the father says to his daughter, I'm validating your neder, and then he says right afterwards, I'm nullifying the neder. And then he added right afterwards and explained what he wants should happen. V'loi teichel hakama, the validation of this neder should not take effect, ela imkein chola hafara. Only if the hafara, the nullifying of this neder, will first take effect. So, Mahu, what's the halach over here? How do we look at the statement? So the Ran says that the Gemara's shaila is, this is for sure that the validation cannot take effect, because he clearly spelled out that the validation should take effect only if the nullification takes effect. So once it's nullified, there's nothing to validate anymore. So if the nullification, if the hafara takes effect, there can't be any hakama following that. If the hafara will not take effect, there is no hakama, because he said the hakama, the validation, should only take effect if there's a hafara there. That's not the Gemara shaila. What the Ran says, the Gemara shaila is, could the hafara even take effect? It would seem like that, the hafara could take effect, but it's only the hakama that can't. But the Ran says the Gemara is having a shaila because in the original lashon that the person said, before he spelled out v'loi teichel, in the beginning he says kayim leichi umufar leichi. So he said first kayim, first he said I'm validating, and then he said mufar leichi. So that lashon actually sounds like he's saying that he doesn't want the nullification to take effect unless first he's going to be able to be mekayim, first validate the neder. Right, so even though afterwards he said v'loi teichel, that's only actually coming to clarify, because in the beginning, maybe we could say like this, in the beginning when he said kayim leichi, mufar leichi, you have to follow the order of what the person said. If he said first kayim leichi, so he wants first the hakama to take effect. And then mufar leichi, after the hakama, the hafara should take effect. But then afterwards he comes around and says as well that the hakama should not take effect unless the hafara takes effect. But the second part of his statement does not change the order of what he said in the first part of his statement. So therefore the hafara can't take effect, because he first said kayim leichi. After the validation, there is no hafara. That's one side. Or maybe you could say that no, even though in the beginning he said kayim leichi first, and he only said meifa leichi afterwards, he didn't mean that the hakama should be first and then the meifa leichi should be afterwards. Because he clearly spelled out afterwards that the hakama is going to take effect only after the hafara. So why did he say in the beginning kayim leichi and mufar leichi? That's because when a person speaks, you can't say two things at the same time. When he said kayim before mefer, he didn't mean to be mekayim first before the hafara. It's just it's impossible for a person to say two things at the same time. So he said kayim before mefer. But really, he wants the hafara should take effect. As we see in the end of the statement, that's the main thing that this person wants, that the hafara should take effect.
But is that
Yeah, all said Techidei Dibur, correct.
So he said Kaim, then he said Mefer, so he meant Mefer because he said that at the end.
But he said Kaim though, which first, so Kaim Lechi.
Good.
Wait, but the moment he said the words Kaim Lechi, it seems like that he's coming to say that first is, but even Techidei Dibur, but if you say first Kaim Lechi, so that's it, you can't be Mefer anymore. So if you take the order of the way he said it, so the Hafara is only following after the Hakama. So that's the question there. Okay, so basically it all boils down to when a person says two things together, and then afterwards he sort of clarifies what he means to say. Do we look at it and say that number one is number one and number two is number two? Or do we say, no, since later we see that he really wants mainly the hafara, so I consider the kayim and mefer to be like he said it together, b'vasachas, and therefore the hafara will take effect. Tashema, so the Gemara proves this This is also quoted here earlier. This is Machlokes miplukte de Rab Meir v'Rab Yosi. So there's an argument between Rab Meir and Rab Yosi regarding a person that speaks in the halacha of a tumura. So what does tumura mean? Tumura is when you have an animal of hektish, and you say that you want to exchange that the animal, instead of this animal being hektish, another animal, different animal should be hektish. Alright, so what happens when you try to exchange? The halacha is the original kedusha of the original animal does not get removed, but it now also adds kedusha on the other animal. But now when the person spoke, he said two things here. So the case is, so the machlokes of Rab Meir and Rab Yosi did now, we learned in the Mishnah, what's if the person said, Harei zu, this animal here should be tumuras oila, should be an exchange of an oila. So the first thing he said is it's going to be an oila. Then afterwards he added tumuras shlomim, that this animal should be in exchange for a shlomim. So what is it? Is it going to be an oila or a shlomim? He said both. Harei zu tumuras oila. So it becomes the exchange of an oila. Divrei Rab Meir, this is Rab Meir's opinion. In other words, Rab Meir is saying, very simple, take the first thing he said. Once he made it an oila, that's what it is. The shlomim that he said afterwards doesn't take effect. Rabbi Yosi says that since he said both, so im lekach neskava mitchila, because he said both, so if this was his intention right from the beginning, that he wants this animal to be a oila and a shlomim, but since it's impossible to say two words at the same time, he can't say tumuras oila and shlomim at the same time. So he has to say oila before shlomim, but really his intention right from the beginning is that the animal should be both an oila and a shlomim. So dvarav kayamim. So therefore, everything he said will take effect, and it'll be an oila and a shlomim. So what's the Gemara proving? From the opinion of Rabbi Yosi, you clearly see that when the person says oila and shlomim, so because he said both, we understand his intention that he wants it to be both. So even though he said first oila, and once it becomes oila, you may say, so now that's it, it's an oila, no more shlomim. But since we see he wants it to be both, so therefore it becomes both. So it's
both.
Yeah, and the animal will have the halachas of an oila and a shlomim. What exactly you'll do with this animal is a good question. But in other words, it'll be both an oila and a shlomim. So similar the Gemara is saying over here, when the person said kayim lechi, imufar lechi, so even though he said first kayim and then mufar, but we see later from the continuation of his statement that he wants the hafara to take effect, because he says that the hafara, the hakama should only take effect if there's a hafara. So therefore we consider both of these things as if he said it together. And if he said it together, the nullification of the neder will take effect. That's according to Rabbi Yosi. So that's the clear raya. Now the Gemara adds that Rabbi Meir, in our case, would even agree. And even Rabbi Meir didn't say that it'll become an oila, and then the shlomim doesn't take effect at all. So the Bach adds here, ella, only over there, because over there, he didn't then come and clarify and say that I don't want this to take effect if that doesn't take effect. Over there he just said oila, and then he said shlomim. So Rabbi Meir says whatever he said first takes effect, what he says second doesn't take effect. Over here when the person says I'm mekayim, then he says I'm mefer, but then he added afterwards the Omar, he said that the hakama should not take effect unless the hafara, the nullification, first takes effect. So Rab Meir nami maided, Rab Meir will agree the hafara chala, that we see clearly from what he said afterwards that his main intention is that the hafara should take effect, and therefore even though he said in his original language hakama first, the hafara takes effect. Okay, one more shaila for today. The Gemara says, the Gemara goes through a bunch of questions here, as we'll see. Boi Rabbe, so another question Rabbe asked, what's if he says, Kayim umufr lechi? So he doesn't then come and add anything, he just says these words, Kayim umufr lechi, I validate and nullify your neder. So what happens now? So b'vasachas, we understand from what he said that he's saying this. He means both together. That I want at the same time I want to validate and nullify another. He's sort of unsure. Mahu. So what's going to be here? Does any of this take effect? Tashema. So the Gemara answers with the following rule. The Omar Rabbe said the rule is that kol, or the Bach over here takes out, and the Bach says, take out the word dover. Kol she'enoi b'zeh achazeh, anything that can't take effect one after the other, afilu b'vasachas einoi. So if you're going to try to make it take effect together, it also will not take effect. So over here, if this person says kayim, after the kiyum, you can't have any hafara anymore. Once it's validated, there's no nullifying this neder. Or in the reverse also, if you already nullified the neder, there's no validating it anymore. So if these two things that he's trying to have take effect together, one after the other, the second will not take effect. So too, if you try to have them take effect at the same time as well, it will also, none of them will take effect. And therefore, in this case, you go back to square one. Basically, the neder is still fully here in effect, and now he still has the option to either do akama or to do afara. That's the way the Gemara resolves this. Okay, we'll stop over here. The next question goes to a bunch of different questions in the next element.
What's the difference between the first and second? Just look like you added a few things in the first.
You mean this Shiloh, the last question we had over here and before? Before he added another line. V'loi teichel ha'akama elam ken kol ha'afara. He added that line, so that shows, but it shows that his main intention is the hafara, because he started off saying b'vasachas. He said kaim lechi mufalechi, but then he added a line, and I don't want akama unless the hafara. So it looks like his main point is the hafara.
Right, but the rule is that the